Thank you, Congressman Scott Perry, and Congressman Perry will be here later this morning for a live address to the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. We will be getting to the Reverend C.L. Bryant a little later on this morning, but right now we are going to go to Lenny McAlister. Lenny is a long-time speaker here at the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. He has now for a number of years been with the Commonwealth Foundation, where he serves as the director for the western part of Pennsylvania. Lenny is familiar to many in our television viewing audience, as he has hosted television programs in Pittsburgh and Chicago. He's been on national outlets, and he is here to talk about how conservatives can expand our base as we move forward here with the policy battles we face at both the state and national level. Please welcome from the Commonwealth Foundation, Lenny McAlister.
Thank you, Loman. Welcome to you all out there today. Thank you for joining us. It's very important in 2020, not just because we're in an election season, but because we're in a pandemic, we're going through harsh social times, and we're going through very hard economic times, to ask ourselves, how do we expand policies that will benefit Americans, not just across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, but throughout our nation? And how do we do that by way of supporting a movement that's going to allow us to advocate for those policies? Today, it's very important for me to come to you to talk to you about one way that we can do it, which is expanding the movement, not just through policies and proposals such as what we heard from President Donald Trump yesterday. Those are very good ideas. But a lot of times those are fixing problems or addressing short-term needs. What we need for advancing prosperity throughout the United States of America, throughout this century, are long-term initiatives that allow us to build teamwork and allow us to build up talent that could advance our policies and bring wins in all corners of both the Keystone State throughout the country. Now, I bring regards from my colleague Angela Saylor from the Heritage Foundation, who was unable to join us today, but I still bring the message that she and I would like to talk to you about this weekend. So let me begin. Expanding the movement. There are different things that we can do throughout our efforts, where we can bring in a diverse group of Pennsylvanians and Americans that will allow us to do the very best that we can to touch different corners, make sure that we're pulling in the talent, and making sure that we're continuing to allow our conservatism to touch new Americans, bring in new generations, and sprout up and prosperity in generations where they may have been influenced by generational poverty before. One way that we have seen this over the years, we have seen this through the way of advising presidents. Now, this is one of the most glamorous ways of doing it, but generally speaking, we have seen over the course of American history, from what we see right now with Dr. Ben Carson advising President Trump, to the historic and very profound Frederick Douglass, as well as people such as Condi Rice, the second African-American Secretary of State, just in the last 20 years alone. We have seen a history of people from diverse backgrounds, whether it's a former slave, a girl that grew up in the Jim Crow South, or a man that grew up in hard times in Michigan to become a world-renowned neurosurgeon, be able to advise Americans and American presidents on the best policies. There are people now such as Jerron Smith, who's doing that now for President Trump, that's bringing a level of intellect and insight necessary to allow the best leaders and the brightest minds throughout presidential administrations to understand the policies that are necessary now and the policies that can grow prosperity moving forward. Now, you have to understand Jerron's story. Jerron is not somebody that grew up and ended up going to an Ivy League school, grew up in a silver spoon household, or had the traditional Republican or conservative path. Jerron was born and raised in Cleveland, Ohio, to a mother that had her own personal struggles, but the family stayed together, and through the leadership of his father and the graciousness of his mother, was able to get to Howard University, where he procured both undergrad and graduate degrees. He was secured as somebody that was leaning left, somebody that was a typical liberal, but through the guidance of people such as former Congressman J.C. Watts, was able to have an opportunity to learn more about his conservatism, why conservatism worked for his family in Ohio, and why he could be a difference in the movement. From there, he started working for J.C. Watts. He also worked for Senator Tim Scott and grew up the train learning about policies, understanding how and why it benefited his old neighborhood in Cleveland, and took his talents all the way to the White House, where today he was instrumental in advising criminal justice reform for President Trump, as well as some of the latest developments that you've heard even earlier this week. But it's more than just advising presidents and serving them and being in the room to give the critical and necessary guidance at those most critical, pivotal points of time to make American history and make it for the better for all of us. There's also the sense of serving constituents and understanding what those constituents need. Now, over the course of our history, we have seen people such as Tim Scott, who is serving historically from the state of South Carolina as the first African-American U.S. Senator since Reconstruction to serve the South. You're also looking at people that have a legacy tying back to the first African-American congressmen and senators that sprouted up after the Civil War and during Reconstruction. You also see people that have been the bridge between those historic times and what you're seeing now in the Senate, people such as the aforementioned J.C. Watts. You have people nowadays in this new generation that are coming up and serving those constituencies in the same exact way, such as D.J. Jordan, a native of Tidewater, Virginia, a former football player at Liberty University, so a little shout out to the Flames out there. But somebody that also went and got his graduate degree from Johns Hopkins. Again, he served and he had an opportunity to serve in the House with several congressmen and senators, but he also, and importantly so, had an opportunity to serve on the House of Representatives Small Business Committee. Now, what's the importance of that? A staffer has an opportunity to bring unique insight into the type of issues that we're facing in our nation. Now, all of you out there know that small businesses drive the American economy. You also know that in order for generational wealth to be grown, one of the best ways of doing that not only is home ownership, but it's also small business ownership, those family businesses that drive the Keystone State and drive communities across the country through service, through passing down generational wealth, and being able to provide communities services that they need. D.J. Jordan, somebody that came from Tidewater and raised his way up through his service on Capitol Hill, was able to not only shape the policy, but also as the communications director, was able to shape the stories so that people could relate to why his service and those like him were so necessary, not just in the conservative movement, but throughout all of America. So we have advising presidents, we have serving constituencies. And when you see people such as DJ out there in the streets, talking to a diverse group of people over the course of his everyday life, every week, every month, every election cycle, it ties into what we also can see from people across our diversity here in America in the 21st century. And that's driving policy. And we have seen that over the course of American history as well, particularly from the African American community and across all different communities, immigrants and Native Americans alike. From Kay Coles James, the first African American and first woman president of the Heritage Foundation, to people such as my native Pittsburgher, Haley Quinn Brown, who fought for women's rights and the right to vote in the turn of the 20th century, as well as people such as Booker T. Washington, who was one of the first ever African Americans to sit down and talk with a sitting president about the policies that were needed in order to bring about equality throughout the United States of America, particularly at a time when it was hard to do. Now, we see that tradition continuing on, and we see young people rising to the top and doing that, such as my sister and good friend, Crystal Corker Hartsfield, who serves currently the governor of Maryland. But before she did that, this native of Atmore, Alabama, a town of 9,000 people, through education and the support of her family, not only got an undergrad degree from Troy University, but also procured 2 master's degrees before traveling up to Washington, D.C. and serving on Capitol Hill. Her service not only was to her community in an effort to show diversity, where she also won, believe it or not, Mrs. Capitol Hill, which is something that you don't hear every day, but also, through her intellect, was able to serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, showing people that there is a way for people in some of the most troubled neighborhoods in our nation to serve our country on the global scale, the global economy, with our military, with innovation that could shape the world and keep the world safe. Those perspectives are highly important to bring to the table, and oftentimes they're overlooked if you don't include people from small town America, whether it's rural Pennsylvania or rural Alabama, having those people in the room. Crystal now serves the governor of Maryland, as we well know, a two-term Republican governor serving in deep blue Maryland. What's the significance of that? The significance is to be able to have somebody in the room that can talk to the needs of people in Baltimore, talk to the needs of people in Prince George's County, talk to people in communities like what we find here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Having that perspective in the room, coupled with the experience that you have from Capitol Hill and the education experience, is absolutely critical and necessary to bring about a country of 325 million people through a pandemic, through another recession, and through turbulent societal times. We also see people that have an opportunity to advance conservatism, maybe not necessarily serving governors, maybe not necessarily serving presidents, maybe not necessarily serving as an elected official, but they're still out there talking about the principles and making the everyday case to people on the street. We see this with faith leaders such as the Reverend Dean Nelson. We've seen this with the Reverend Alveda King and Reverend Jackson as well. We've also seen this from elected officials that were able to bring about a conservative message before they had an opportunity to win elected office. Ed Brooke of Massachusetts, before he was a U.S. Senator and before he was the Massachusetts Attorney General, lost elections but advocated for Republican principles, conservative principles, free market principles that made sense in a state that had already given the nation JFK. And he was able to break both societal barriers when it came to politics and policy, but also racial barriers during the turbulent 1960s to be a groundbreaking politician and policy leader along the way. But just the same, we see cultural icons, such as the late Jackie Robinson, who is more known for breaking the color barrier in Major League Baseball and being an example for Major League sports throughout the nation, but also was a groundbreaking Republican and conservative that took his message of need for diverse communities to people including former Vice President and eventual President of the United States, Richard Nixon. And there are people that are doing that today. Crystal Hartsfield served the RNC in advancing conservatism, but now her replacement is Mr. Kevin Daniels, a man that is untraditional in many, many ways, but yet has served a governor, has also served his community, and now serves the RNC as the director of strategic initiatives. Now, Kevin has a little bit of a unique background. He is not a Capitol Hill veteran. He's not even a Southerner or hailing from a place that you would traditionally believe Republicans and conservatives come from. As you can see from the Yankees hat, Kevin is a Yankees fan by way of Yonkers. And as soon as he opens his mouth and you hear that New York accent, you can understand that he's not like what you're used to hearing from a typical conservative, a typical free market believer. But much like the 45th President of the United States, who also hails from New York, he believes in getting America back to where it can be and where it needs to be. Kevin's rise came through the Frederick Douglass Foundation, a pro-life, pro-Christian organization. And from that, he moved into the conservative principles that our Constitution supports. He moved into the free market principles that our economy, based on capitalism and bringing people up through the capitalistic way of life and making sure prosperity spreads, also provided an opportunity for him to learn. From there, he started serving a Republican governor who helped bring about a wave of Republicans and conservatives in 2010 that had not served in the General Assembly of North Carolina since the end of Reconstruction. Kevin is part of that new group that goes across the country, coming into key states such as Michigan and Pennsylvania to talk about the conservative way of life, talk about free market principles, and talk about why we have the solutions to get us through the problems that we're facing today. Now, one person that signified all of that throughout their service to the Keystone State was the late Renee Moore, a friend of mine, a mentor of mine. God rest her soul, and thank you, Renee, for your service. Renee's service exemplified all that we're trying to do as we move forward in the 21st century as conservatives, as free market believers. We believe that we can touch all different aspects of our society, whether it's healthcare, whether it's creating jobs, whether it's school choice and education reform, and being able to bring about policies that not only make sense to us in the fight, but make sense to those that need us to stay in the fight. And all the people that I highlighted today, through their various backgrounds, whether it's Virginia or rural Alabama, or the Midwest, Cleveland, Ohio, no offense to the Browns fans out there, or places such as New York City and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. There's a common thread there, even in our diversity. Difference of skin color, difference of religion, difference of socioeconomic background. We believe in the American way of life. We believe in prosperity. We believe in the value of education. We believe that if given a chance, starting with education, starting with constitutional equality, the understanding that constitutional law and order is available to all Americans. Through that foundation, we understand that each American has an opportunity to pursue their happiness as they see fit and what is best for their communities, their families, and thus our country. There's the importance of expanding our movement, particularly during a very turbulent 2020. We have the opportunity, folks, to explain to people why we have the solutions that they need. President Donald Trump had an opportunity to announce on Friday new initiatives that would help the black community, the Platinum Plan. But that's more than just for black people. And expanding the movement is more than just for black people. The United States of America is always going to be a global leader. But in order to stay the global leader, we have to make sure that we're leading economically. We need to make sure that our military is strong. We need to make sure that we're innovative. We need to make sure that our populace is educated, understands our civics, as well as understands what makes us great and why we will continue to be great. As we have seen in our presentation, there is a number of individuals that have taken their unique backgrounds, their unique challenges, even their failures at different parts of their lives. Ben Carson's talked about that a lot. Frederick Douglass fought through slavery. And even the contemporary icons and heroes that I mentioned today, the young people and the late Renee Moore, have had their own struggles as well. But through those struggles, we get to understand the very essence of what America and what the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania is truly all about. It's about having the opportunity to have second chances, to be as great as you can be for yourself and for those around you. That through good policies that give people the opportunity to be empowered, there's an opportunity to chase the very best in yourself, to keep believing, to keep knowing that you can do better and that those around you can do better. That the heartache that you see around you right now does not have to be the heartache forever. We have been through so many difficult times, and each corner of our nation has fought through so many difficult times. And we're going through difficult times right now. But through good policies and good leaders, through identifying new leaders and new talents to be able to connect to new constituencies, we can make a difference in this nation. We can turn around this pandemic. We can turn around our economy. We can make sure our kids get the education that they need. And we can make sure that this nation stays great for decades to come. So I implore you, expand the movement. Look for the talent. Identify those around you that can make a difference. Learn more about your conservatism and free market principles so that we can convince more people that we have the solutions that they need and we're willing to be the allies that they've been looking for. Thank you so much for your time today. You have a wonderful weekend. Take care and God bless.